Well, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm so thrilled to see so many of my friends here in the audience and on stage. The Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, has said forensic science is a priority for this administration. I think my being up here on this stage is a manifestation of that. I've only been there recently, but clearly there have been multiple efforts that have been launched well before my time. One of those efforts came to fruition today. I'm here, among other things, to tell you that today we announced the Federal Register notice of what we call the uniform language on testimony and reports. That went live this morning at 10 o'clock. We described this language for 7 forensic science disciplines: fibers, footwear and tire treads, general chemistry, glass, latent prints, serology, and toxicology. Later this summer, there will be another set of forensic science disciplines. I anticipate that they would include firearms and tool marks, explosives, DNA, other trace evidence such as hair, and handwriting. These documents on uniform language for testimony and reports should tell our forensic scientists within the Department of Justice how they may report or word their report and word their testimony in courts, what they may or may not say. This effort really arose from a review of microscopic hair comparisons out of the FBI, where they recognized to look into the testimony of their examiners, there ought to be some standard by which we should look and compare and review. That led the FBI to formulate a series of what they called ASTERs, approved scientific standards for testimony and reports. The Department of Justice said that we needed to look at these from a department-wide standpoint so that other components might also be using similar language, and that we should also be very concerned about what forensic scientists are saying and to what extent they're based on scientific standards. So the Department of Justice started with the ASTERs developed by the FBI, which I should say have been in use for about a year and a half, and they seem to be well accepted and seem to be effective. So the Office of Legal Policy took those standards and then asked the other components, and with some further dialogue and discussions, formulated these proposed uniform language documents. These uniform language documents should be considered draft because we really want to still get public input. So it was put on the Federal Register today with hot links to another place so that you can get these documents, because we, the Department of Justice, really want to get a broad set of input. We recognize that they may be persuasive out in the community, impactful. But in the end, these documents are internal to the Department of Justice. That is to say, we're going to use these documents for our own forensic scientists. We're asking for this input on a website that's the notice is at www.justice.gov/forensics. And comments can be posted on www.regulations.gov through July 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. This is been a terrific discussion thus far. I'm sure there are some questions that we can handle at this point. Anybody? Yes, sir.
This is for John Paul Jones. The registry. Is there any provisions for managing documents that go into the registry?
In what sense? When they come off, when they go on, when they're up for review?
It's just been my experience that standards, because the culture changes, become need currency. And so, is there any provisions for reviewing the documents that go into the registry for update?
Yeah, we do have a review cycle written into our charter, and I have a feeling, though, that the standards will be updated quicker in the SDOs than when our reviews would take place. And so what I mean is, if like this drug standard that's up there right now, it's undergoing revision right now in ASTM. And as things are pointed out that need to be updated, they go into revision in the SDO, and then it follows the OSAC process again to consider replacing it. So the answer is twofold. Yes, through the actual SDOs that own these standards, there is the review cycle defined by their bylaws, and we also do have a review and replacement cycle. Does that address? Okay.
Yes. Andrew?
I know that those people that are in the know can access the sites and submit their public comments. I'm just wondering, because this has such broad implications in terms of standards and what the implications of that would be. Would you consider sending out a notice, because you said you only have a 30-day window to file a comment, but in advance, sending out a notice to the major organizations that have vested interests, that have stakeholders involved, such as the American Academy of Forensic Science and Financial Association,
No, it's not done, JP.
maybe a couple of other organizations, and giving them a little advance time to send out this notice in a mass email to all their members, so that they don't have to go to the trouble of finding out and have a short window.
But the public, yes.
Okay. So we do have the 6 major professional forensic science associations on our board of directors, and we do encourage them to redistribute our email that goes to 10,000 people. I think for the upcoming one where we're in some of our newsletters, we are not announcing public comment periods. They don't happen. We don't always have standards up for review. I think for the one that's upcoming, your suggestion is great to emphasize to those 6 agencies to redistribute our awareness about the public comment period to their 20,000 members that they represent. So
that way you can't, they make comments quickly and give them
Right.
a considerable opportunity in terms of time. So I think that would be a fair policy for that, if that I understand it.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions. Mr. LaPorte?
Jerry?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, in your impressions, pattern, and evidence disciplines, did you exclude microscopic hair examinations and forensic pathology? And if you excluded forensic pathology, I'm particularly interested in is there national standards for state medical examiners in examining bodies in relation to cause of death? And I understand that the Department of Justice representative just talked about the language, internal language for microscopic hair examinations. I'm a former prosecutor in the Atlanta Judicial Circuit when Wayne Williams was tried 35 years ago. That case was based upon microscopic hair examinations. There are a lot of dead bodies that are tied to hairs
Fibers.
of animals in the South, particularly in Georgia. So that is very important.
So I'll handle a little bit of that question. I'll hand over to Victor since he's a medical examiner. But that Wayne Williams case, that was based on fiber identification, not hairs, just to let you know. So it was fibers, carpet fibers. So it was for the purpose of my discussion, yes, that I excluded microscopic hair comparison because that's not a pattern or an impression type of analysis. It is a comparison analysis, but it's not patterns or impressions per se. I'll hand it over to Dr. Weedn since he's a medical examiner. He can handle the other part of your question.
Well, first I'll comment that these new proposed uniform language for testimony and reports do include both fibers and hairs. In this first set, it includes fibers, but we do anticipate document on hair examination as well, microscopic hair examination as well. In terms of medical examiners, the National Association of Medical Examiners has a set of standards on forensic autopsy performance. It also has standards incorporated in their inspection and accreditation program. Those two documents are not exactly the same. They cover a lot of the same material. There are some differences. Both can be found on their website. It's public information. In terms of death certificates, that's a different kettle of fish, really. But that's more the documentation and less the investigation and determination of the cause and manner of death. There are guidelines out there for death certification, published by name and published by others. Randy Hanslick is particularly notable in this regard. He has some publications here.
Randy Hensley.
Hanzlick.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Gerald, most labs don't have the luxury of having research units, and those that do, most of the time is spent doing validation. And so how receptive would you say are journalists to publish validation studies, especially on things that are already established, because we know that just because something's new in the forensic world or the courts doesn't mean that it's necessarily new in the clinical world or research.
Yeah, such a great question. We could talk a long time for that, but I think sort of to make it simple, I can tell you that based on a Bureau of Justice statistics survey in 2014, only 7% of state and local laboratories actually have any efforts going on in research and development, any dedicated research and development efforts. Now, there was a recent survey, I'm sorry, that was a 2009 survey, but there's a recent survey that will come out. I'm actually interested in seeing that number if it's gone up. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that state and local laboratories are, they're hamstrung. They're trying to work cases. And then sort of to go on to your second, sort of the second part of your comment is that generally in my world, validation isn't considered research. So most journals will not publish validation type things. So validation is a separate process that should be based on having strong research and foundations. So typically a validation type thing just doesn't sort of make it to the research level. However, 2 years ago, we NIJ created a new solicitation that was focused on state and local laboratories to, we would fund the validation of certain methods. One of the things that we wanted to do, two things, was we wanted to stress to the laboratories that they could bring in a postdoc, they could bring in researchers. We would pay for that. Then we would create more interaction between the laboratory folks and a researcher. And then number two is that most validation studies that take place in a laboratory are never published. They're never put out publicly. If you receive an NIJ grant, then you're required to make that validation public. And then other laboratories could see that, people could comment on it and so forth. But great question.
One last question, because we're almost out of time.
The use of the terminology consistent with, can you give us a little bit of background when this began creeping in? Because it sounded like the term kosher style as opposed to kosher. It's not a matchup, but, and is that good enough for a criminal case? it's consistent with as opposed to, in my opinion, A and B are similar or exact?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd have to offer my opinion on this one, and based on my experience, I've testified, I don't know, about 85 times or so, both federal, or all federal, state, local, in civil cases as well. As a chemist, I think I can just say, once again, this is from my opinion, is sometimes we struggle in trying to communicate. If we believe something is the same, we're going to tell you it's the same. But very often in science, it's impossible. Well, I shouldn't say impossible, nearly impossible to say two things are the same. If I was going to compare this paper to see if they came from the same source, I'd have to do every organic and inorganic analysis. I'd have to look at everything in this paper, in these two pieces of paper. And then I still might be missing something. I still might not be able to say that they're the same. So what we do is I think we're trying to find other words to communicate that. So now we come to the synonyms, I guess. And so we say, okay, well, I did a chemical analysis, I did SEM, GCMS, and FTIR. I couldn't differentiate all of these components. Therefore, they're similar, or they could have come from the same source. So that's just my that's the Jerry LaPorte take on it.
That is a great way, yeah,
I'll point out that that's directly on topic for these proposed uniform language on testimony reports. And so I would very much encourage you to look at them and comment.
Great. We have to call a close to the panel. It's time. Want to thank all the panelists for great presentations, and we're on to the next one.